Hello and welcome to the Let's Get Started with Google Chrome Music Lab. Really excited to get this webinar underway, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Heather Rhodes as well. Good morning, Heather. How are you?
Hi there. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you. I think we've all had some gremlins in the internet this morning, and it hasn't all quite worked as we would want it to. I certainly know we're doing this off 4G now, so apologies if it's a bit baggy, and we'll just see how we go and work it out as we go along. So Chrome Music Lab is something that I've been using with my computer games development class as a computing science teacher for making music to go along with the computer games, and it's something that you've been using quite extensively as well.
I've just recently started using it. I found quite a lot of inventive and creative ways to kind of enhance the digital learning aspect of where we currently are at present. So yeah, some exciting things I found, hoping to share with you as well.
Excellent, that's really good. So for people who are completely new to Chrome Music Lab, well, it's a website that makes learning more accessible through fun, hands-on experiences and experiments. And those experiments help us depending on what we do with them, depends on what sounds are made and things. And I think it's a really nice interactive tool. So if you're using Chrome Music Lab at the moment, make sure you're introducing yourself in the chat. Share your Twitter handle, so hopefully we can share some of what's been going on. And maybe, well, Heather, you were saying people should be showing their favourite colours in the chat, because a lot of the Music Lab is about kind of colours and shapes.
Yeah, I quite like that idea you did in one of your other sessions. I think it was with Annabelle. You'd asked everyone about their favourite ice cream colour, and I felt a bit left out. So yeah, I think we want favourite colours today and see what we can come up with.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, I think if you're kind of ready to start introducing some of the tools, I'll bring your screen in and we can get going.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I'm ready to go. Fire away.
There you go.
So I've made a little slide deck, which I will happily share with all of you. There's a lot of resources which I've created, which I've asked Ian very nicely if he would create a collaborative space, which we can potentially give you access to throughout this and afterwards. But what I've done is basically broken down all of the Chrome Music Lab experiments, as they're called, just to give you a brief overview of what they kind of do and their functions, and I'll talk a little bit more about kind of lesson plans and how I've utilised them in the classroom and with this digital learning platform. So Chrome Music Lab is an experiment. It's not a proper, like a Google Doc or something that's integrated. It's an entirely separate side of things. The Chrome Music Lab was created by Google in 2006, and it's entirely free. It's a really simple to use, and its main aim is to allow visitors to explore sound and create with sound. And there's a vast majority of things in here which you can utilise, some of which I've done with kind of qualification level classes, but there's a vast scope that you can use all the way up, I think, personally from nursery all the way through to secondary. The Chrome Music Lab is, and I've just broken it down into some points for you, it's free, it's entirely interactive. Again, like I said about colours, it's really bright and colourful, and a really good benefit here is that it works on more or less every device you can think of. I've not potentially had very many issues with pupils saying I'm not able to access this unless, for example, they're using Internet Explorer. But that's the real only issue that I've kind of run into up to date. And the fact that it's really simple to use, although I'm giving most of my classes instructions. Hello?
I'd say that's a really good point. Chrome Music Lab works really well in the Chrome browser. Sorry, Heather, I cut in there while you were full flow. That wasn't kind of me.
No, I thought there was maybe something like an issue, another internet thing. Just double checking.
No, I think we're all good. I've just watched ourselves on the internet, so we're definitely live. But I think a few internet providers are having issues with their broadband provision, so maybe not got as many viewers as we'd hoped for. But we'll keep going.
We'll watch this space. They can watch it afterwards, and we can watch through the glitches.
It will be on catch up.
Yeah, so as Ian was saying, yeah, it's working on any device, which I found is great. Obviously, I've done all the experiments of trying to get them to work on a computer, working with my phone, trying to get them on an iPad, just as many devices as possible, just to make sure there wasn't potentially no glitches before I started running a task with pupils. The Chrome Music Lab has 13 different areas. Some of them are amazing, others have very limited functions. But it's entirely your choice which ones you want to use. For example, the main one I'm going to talk about today is the song maker. I'm going to talk about the chords, arpeggios, and more music technology side of things. I'm going to talk about the oscillators and the sound waves and the spectrogram, which I've used with both my third year and my fourth year music technology classes. But in this PowerPoint, I've kind of given an overview of most of them, and the one that I'm going to start with today is the song maker. So when you open up Chrome Music Lab, if you just type in Chrome Music Lab into the browser, these are the kind of squares that come up, and like I said before, it's really colourful, it's really bright, and it feels really inviting. The interface is a really nice visual aid for pupils. And you can kind of see before you start more or less what's going to happen with the vast majority of the icons and the experiments that they've created. So I'm going to click on the song maker one to start off with, just to show you the interface. And then I'm going to explain some of the features and things, and I'm going to show you some of the tasks that I've created around this as well. So the song maker has this interface, and it looks just a load of boxes, a couple of buttons, but a very interactive tool in the sense of if you're using on a tablet, an iPad, a phone, where basically you can just use your finger or your mouse to click anywhere on the screen. And can you hear me? You should be able to hear that each note as it goes up rises in pitch.
Yes, we can.
Oh, I had issues with this before, so I'm really glad you can hear it. And obviously each note has a different colour and a different pitch. So this is entirely creative. You can also change the instruments down the bottom, which is quite a lot of fun. So you can ask kids to be creative. Would you like it to be a piano or strings, woodwind instruments, synthesizers, marimba? And it's also building their kind of skills development about understanding what different instruments sound like, as well as the interactive side of things. So are they subconsciously learning? Don't know, but you're definitely experimenting with a range of different sounds. If I go back to my wee presentation, I've kind of broken this down into a nice wee slide. There's lots of features in here, but like I said, Song Maker allows you to make a song by adding notes and clicking on the grid. But another really nice thing is you can use the computer keys as well. So if you didn't have a touchscreen device, or you didn't have a mouse, for example, you could, don't know why you wouldn't have a mouse, but you could use the keyboard to add different letters, and using the arrow keys to move up, back, backspace to add remove notes, and obviously the space bar to play. So by that means it's entirely interactive for you to do whatever you want with. And the last bit, or the second bit down the bottom, using a MIDI keyboard. I don't have one, but I know that we definitely have them in school, and we utilise them a lot for third and fourth year music technology and higher. So you can plug in a MIDI keyboard and play around with a MIDI keyboard. Brings in that aspect. And you can also sing notes into your microphone, which I won't do for you today, but you can, if I go back, there's a little microphone one down the bottom. I can speak, hopefully I'm not going to sing, but it'll start working out kind of what pitch I'm at, like this one, and it kind of has got that interactive thing where it kind of moves up and down the screen from where I can start to, etc. So
we've got a question here from Cameron. So it's an interactive MIDI grid.
Kinda, yeah, more or less. If you had a different interface, for example, or a different software, like we use Cubase at school, we do tend to have down the side, and you can technically see the little coloured boxes, and you can see the keyboard at one side. It's more or less the same, just without the kind of keyboardy kind of side of things. Yeah, so I would say it's very similar.
Great, thank you.
And another really good thing about it as well, if we're talking about a kind of MIDI interactiveness, if you go down to save at the end, you can download the MIDI file, and you can also download the WAV file as well. So yeah, it kind of encompasses that side of things. So yeah, interactive in that sense. And as I said at the bottom, you can share your link, you can download a MIDI file, or you can change it to a WAV file as well, and you can have a space to save that. Down the side, I've given you kind of some of the features and things that you can do with it. This has probably got the most features out of all of the tracks that are there. So you can change the playback sounds, like I said before, down the bottom. So you can change the instrument sounds. You can change the tempo of the piece of music that you create. You can change the scale. So you can either make all the notes a major scale, a pentatonic scale, or a chromatic scale. And I've actually created, I'll show you in a wee second, a pentatonic task using the Chrome Music Lab, which I think is great for the BGE, and could potentially have scope to start National 4 or National 5 composition if you wanted it to. Again, obviously I don't know what the future holds for SQE in regard to music composition and the element of it, but it might get you somewhere started that you could then adapt and change to potentially more realistic's the wrong word, but more conventional notation software. You can change the length of your composition on Songmaker, but unfortunately it's only capped at the moment to 16 bars of length. So it has some scope, but it doesn't have an awful lot. But again, in regard to composition, you could start and maybe one section of your music could be worth 16 bars, and then you ask them to create something else, potentially in a minor key or a different key or a different set of notes around that. You again change the number of beats in a bar. You can change the range of notes. So I think it's capped at 1 octave, 2 octaves, or 3 octaves, which is a relatively small range, but I've managed to come up with a few tasks that actually encompass that range of notes quite well. Again, you can change the starting note. It always starts in C, but you can change that to G, you can change it to F, you can change it to any note you want, and then obviously you can subdivide the beats. At present, it's kind of stuck into 1 bar is subdivided into quavers. So every square you've got is a quaver. So if I go back to the Chrome Music Lab, each of these ones here, so that would be the blue line would signify a crotchet beat. And then each of these, but you can see that technically they are ever so slightly coloured differently. It's not particularly obvious, but each of those kind of 8 squares signifies 1 bar of music. So you can plan it around that, and you can let pupils know. So that's kind of the functions and features. But I'm going to show you
great.
A task.
Heather, just before you get to that, we had another question come in asking if you can import MIDI files.
I don't think you can. It's very much just keeping things onto Google. It's just saving and exporting rather than putting anything in. I've never actually tried to put it in, but through the settings I've looked at, it doesn't seem to be a feature that's available.
Yeah, absolutely. So my understanding is exactly as yours is. You know, you've got the ability to create and export, but not the ability to be able to import. I think what you're probably going to show us in a bit is if you partially make something, you can share that with someone, and they can then continue to work on with their own version. So I'm sure you'll get to that bit. So I think
that's a task that I'm going to show them just now. And this is, I've also shared this into the Google Drive that Ian's created. So if at some point Ian would do the dissemination of that if people want to, and I'll leave that to you. But I've got a couple of tasks in here that I'd like to show you. So there is a selection of things that I've put up. So this was the first ever Chrome Music task that I gave my second years, and this was during lockdown. So what I asked them to do was use the Chrome Music Lab to finish a song. And the song that I gave them to start off with was very much a basic, and hopefully all of them knew it. It was the start of Happy Birthday. So in a musical sense, if you look at the coloured bars, this one here is the start of the Anacrusis. So the upbeat, it starts before the first beat of the bar. So you should be able to see that, and it could be a concept that you wanted to teach, you can kind of see it in this one. So what I'll do is I'll play this for you so that you can hear it, and then you'll be able to see how I've managed to plan the task around it. So. I hope you're all singing along. And what Chrome Music Lab does is it continues to play it back on a loop until obviously you press stop. So the task that I gave the pupils, if I go back, is I've said, click on the link, and I gave them the attachment. I was able to do this through Google Classroom just by the assignment and then clicking on link and pasting the link down the bottom. Obviously, what I asked them to do was guess the song, and then what I asked them to do was finish the tune. So first of all, that was stage one, was I wanted them to use the interactive features to scroll along to come up with, I need to find the notes now, etc. And create the rest of the tune and create the rest of the song all the way down to the end, and play it back. So I wanted them to use that interactive feature. I also wanted to develop their kind of oral skills in that sense, that they were identifying different pitches, but I've also given them another element by giving them the colours and hoping that they'll be able to identify and work out the different colours. It's easy enough if you make a mistake just to click back onto the colour that you've done and it just deletes automatically. But if you did want to be more fancy, you can add 2 notes in at once, etc., or add in chords, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So that task there was for them to, first of all, to finish off the remainder of the song. And then if I go back to my instructions, I've then asked them to enhance the song. So I've asked them to make the music a little bit better by experimenting by adding in some sort of drum kit part. And the drum kit part and the rhythm part is very basic, but it also adds that extra element to the song, and it's using circles for the bass drum and triangles for the hi-hat. And that pattern is just down here in the bottom. And you could, for example, bring this back into classroom music and which ones, if I go back to the kit side of things, which one are the hi-hats and which one are the bass drums, etc., or which ones are different types of the drum kit patterns, and work it that way. So I've now added a drum kit part. I don't know how good it will sound, but it's etc. And you can carry on that and you can experiment. You can add 2 things in at once. The stage further of this is obviously to get them to write this out in proper notation, and giving them the signs and symbols, etc., in order to do that. But there's a vast... And there's lots of experimentation with that kind of kit part at the bottom and then the coloured boxes on top.
That's sounding really good, Heather. I think we're having a little bit of lag though as you're playing and we're hearing it, but we're definitely getting the idea of what's happening.
Yeah, polyrhythmic. I'm just making it up as I go along. There are lots of things that you can do. There was a really good YouTube video which I'll find at some point, where there was a gentleman on who had created very much a very basic kind of rhythm side of things, and what he did was he actually got his recorder out and he played on top of it, which I thought was hilarious, but it was a very good video to kind of demonstrate that you can create something very basic using rhythms and using notes, and then use it basically as an improvisation platform for him to create music on top of. So I thought that was quite fun. I'll see if I can find that video at some point. So that was task 1 that I'd created. It was very much a introduction task to get pupils started. And then obviously I gave them the instructions that when you're finished, select the save at the right bottom corner. That was back to the copy link. And what they were able to do is go back to Google Classroom and select the link option to go back and to paste the link in. And then I was able to hear some of their creations. I'm actually going to show you one of the creations that one of my pupils came up with. Again, I asked them to create Happy Birthday, and he ended up in a total really creative version of Pirates of the Caribbean. So if I can find that for you, I will show you. This is what he came up with. This was a second year. Here you go. So again, he's experimented down the bottom with the drum kit part. It's very basic, but if you look at his melody and the things that he's created with it, I don't know whether he has copied it or not from somewhere, but it's a really good piece of music, so I'll play you it. It's quite short and it only goes to the end, but he could have extended it if he wanted. So here you go. What do you think? Considering it was supposed to be Happy Birthday.
That's quite a remix, isn't it?
Isn't it?
So we've got a question here from Norman. Could you make this task around adding harmonies around the melody?
Yes, and I'm going to talk about that in a wee second using the chord feature as well. Yeah, but absolutely. This would be a really good example to talk about different levels of melody, harmony, and kind of chord structure. Obviously here he's added in a chord, which would be an E minor chord, just based on the notes and the letters. So you could really analyse this. You could analyse the chords in here, etc., and do that all around that. So I think it's a great example. You'll be getting a good report from me, which is due on Monday. But yeah, it wasn't what I asked for, but a fantastic example.
Thanks.
So yeah, that was something that he kind of came up and he created. So dead chuffed. Another one that I'm going to show you just now is another task that I've made up around this. And that task is a pentatonic composition. So there is a sheet
I think we've
here.
just lost you for a second there, Heather.
That's okay. Am I back? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, I think you're back.
Are we back online?
Dodgy internet connection this morning.
Is that right? Can you see my lovely colourful screen on pentatonic composition?
Okay, Heather, I think we're maybe back in now.
Are we? I can hear you.
I think we had a massive lag, but I think it was still going to YouTube, so we'll keep trying.
I was typing my comments down the side, so I hope we're okay.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. Yeah.
Right.
I think we're all good now.
Okay. Can you see my pentatonic composition, my lovely colourful screen?
Yes, we can. It looks lovely.
Fab. So this is kind of my next task, and I'm hoping to post it at some point. I mean, I've not tried this out, but I hope it works. So I found out when I was creating this task that a few primary schools and a few secondary schools use boom whackers. And I've actually found out that the colours for the boom whackers are the same as the colours for the Chrome Music Lab. So the integration of that is pretty clever, and you could easily create something on Chrome Music or Songmaker and then print it, send it, and a classroom kind of performance could be something related to that. Again, obviously, if you were using software like Sibelius or something, you could colour the notes the same ones as well. So in here, what I've asked them to do is obviously I've given them a keyboard. So I'm now asking them to bring in their literacy side of things and their skills, where each of the letters has a different colour. And then obviously each of the squares relates to a letter on the keyboard. If I scroll down, I've obviously given them the learning intentions and success criteria based on what I would expect them to complete in a composition. Again, you can entirely edit this to whichever learning intentions and success criteria you were looking for. I've done it in a very basic kind of broad general education point of view in order to develop it that way, and just giving them the clear, this is what I want, or this is what I want you to achieve when you're completing this task. So I've given them a little bit of information about what is the pentatonic scale, a little bit of background about it, again, the colours, what notes and things they should be using. And then I've broken it down into what they're needing to do for their different parts. So I've given them the link to the Songmaker, and this time I'm giving them a blank canvas. I'm not giving them half a song to recreate. I'm giving them entirely free range of this. But I'm obviously looking, if I go back to the success criteria, that I want it to be 8 bars in length. And a really good feature is that I can make the scale pentatonic now. So if I go back to Chrome Music Lab, let me open a new one because I want it to be a blank screen. And I go back to settings, I can change my scale up here to just be pentatonic. Now, I did swither and sway whether or not to leave it as major and let them work out which notes they should and shouldn't use, or whether to just entirely make it pentatonic to begin with. Again, you can tailor that on whichever lesson and tailor it to the class that you've got in front of you, but just for ease, I've kind of gone for pentatonic so they can't really particularly make any mistakes. Again, want it to be 8 bars in length, and at this point I do only want it to still be in quavers, and I think I still kept it at 2 octaves, and obviously I want it to be the C major pentatonic scale, so I've left the starting note at middle C. So
Hello, Heather.
hi.
Well, I think the internet's back on, but I think it turned everything back off for me. So
Oh no.
So the last thing I heard was 8.
Right, okay.
So pick up from that.
Okay, I'll go back. So in my settings, length was 8 bars because that was the success criteria that I set, as well as the scale being set to pentatonic, making sure there's 4 beats in a bar, that every subdivision is still going to be stuck to quavers at the moment. I'm not going into any other fancier divisions of 3s and 4s, etc. I'm going to stick with quavers, making sure that it's stuck with pentatonic, and again, starting on middle C, and I'm just going to keep the range at 2 octaves just now. So if I go back, that kind of resets my song maker. And if I click on the squares for it, if I click on the squares now, they're entirely the pentatonic notes. There's no extra ones in there. But again, if you wanted to kind of differentiate that, you could have some pupils who need to be a little bit more tailored to have more structure, just to have the pentatonic ones, or again, for those maybe more advanced, to leave it on the major scale and then letting them work out that, oh, I'm not supposed to have a pink box, for example, or I'm not supposed to have a light green box. You could do it that way. So that was the task that I set them. Again, I've asked them to, I said 3 octaves, my apologies. But I've asked them to change different settings. So I've asked them for this time specifics. I want it on strings and kit. I want their tempo set. And I've also thrown this one in here that I want them to create a rhythmic ostinato using the triangles and I think it's circles actually, I don't think it's squares. Hold on. Oh, it's triangles and circles, not triangles and squares. I'm going to change that. To create a rhythmic pattern that repeats over and over again. So I'm now throwing in an extra word in there, a musical term that I'm looking for in order to develop their knowledge. Again, then adding a melody on top, making sure that they're completing all 8 bars of music, and then obviously the same back to completing the tasks, etc., and submitting it back through Google Classroom, because that's the platform that we're using at present. And then obviously to consolidate that, as much as that's the compositional element, I've also asked them I've created a worksheet that goes along with this. And the worksheet looks like this. And I've given them an understanding task. So might sound really silly, but what was the name of the application or program you used to create your music on? Yeah, I've had some weird and wacky answers to that. So it's at the top of the page as well, Songmaker. So just making sure they're on the right platform. And again, all the answers are on that sheet that I've given them for the instructions. So what notes make up the C major scale, how many notes, etc. What the note name and the colour, so they know what they're doing. Again, a backup, can they paste a link to their composition in here, as well as obviously having access to it on Google Classroom. Again, it can be used as evidence. They managed to delete themselves from Google Classroom, which I found out some of my 4th years had done before I'd finally collated all their results and stuff for the SQA. Found out they deleted themselves and I lost all their work that they were doing. So having a backup here as well, that this document automatically obviously saves to Google Drive. And then stepwise, what is an ostinato? And then the thing that we're kind of looking for in regard to broad general education and benchmarking and potentially qualification level composition, is you're looking for that evaluation side of things. So I've really just put in a very basic 2 stars and a wish table, and then a comments box as well that I can use for my own evidence and my own teacher comments back. So I've just made those 2 together to see if it would work. But honestly, feel free to use these if you want to, and send them out to your kids. And if you do use them, can you let me know how it goes, and see if it was worth it. But I'm definitely going to implement this at some point with my second years and potentially third years.
I've put the resources, which is just a bit.ly, so bit.ly/CML for Chrome Music Lab, and then 2905 for the 29th of May. Wow, can you believe we did it at the end of May?
Brilliant. I need to make sure that some of these, when you click on them, for example, that they end up making you get a copy of these as well, so that these are obviously the master ones at present, but I'll put these in afterwards. It's not an issue.
Great. Thanks very much, Heather.
So that's my kind of Chrome Music Lab. A couple of the other features, if I go back to the actual Chrome Music Lab and the different experiments, there's a couple of other ones that I want to talk about in regard to music performance, and I've actually used them in conjunction with the Chrome Song Maker as well. And one of those, if I go back to the task, is one to do with chords. So again, chords is something that you can talk about with second year, third year, fourth year classes. Obviously, it's a requirement for SQA. I made up a little worksheet, and I've kind of used this to say, go and have a check of this. So if I wanted to know the notes of an F major chord, I've made sure that the little toggle button down the bar is set to major. And then all I have to do is make sure that I know where an F is on the keyboard. And what it will do is it'll automatically tell me which notes are in an F major chord, which is brilliant. So the task I've made along to go with this, I think, is this one. Could be wrong. Yeah, it's this one. So obviously giving them again the kind of theoretical back story to this, what makes up a triad, what is a triad, how we work out the different notes. So I'm giving them the background to this. But then down the bottom, what I've asked them to do again is open up the device, the Chrome Music Lab, and then the app and program. And then what I've asked them to do is work out what the notes are in the following chords. And I've given them the root, the third and the fifth, and they can go back up and do that. Obviously, I would ask them to try and do that using the theoretical method, but obviously to go back to the Chrome Music Lab and to say, right, I'm looking for G major. Toggles at major, great, there's G, that's a G, A, O, next third is a B, C, and then a D. And then obviously to go back to my document and then to type in G, B, and D, etc. So there is that side of things, which you can do. And then obviously if I got to question 3 and it's asking me for an A minor chord, to toggle this back to minor, and then obviously click on A, and then there comes my minor chord. So it's a kind of, I'm using them and getting them to check their work. It's a double whammy, if that makes sense, about going back to see this. It's going to give them the answer, but getting them to use their knowledge about the task that's above in order to generate that and their answers. Again, task 2 is to do with their literacy side of things. So again, they've got an actual piece of written music notation. Again, asking them to name the chord. And then this bit down the bottom, I've brought back that composition pentatonic image. And now what I'm asking them to do is, what are the notes based on the chords in the Chrome Music Lab, in the Song Maker? So I'm asking them what notes, and they should be able to relate them back to the coloured diagrams and the coloured boxes. And then obviously asking them what chord is shown. So National 3, National 4, National 5 music could easily work for you in this sense. So I've kind of thrown both sides in there, using the chord side of things and using the Song Maker at the same time. So there is that one. And I've actually given them a task, I think, if I remember correctly from making this. that I've given them a chords activity and another chords activity, but I also went a step further and went higher and advanced higher, so 5th and 6th year level. And obviously the start of this is the same, but for advanced higher, you're now being asked for things called chord inversions. So again, the worksheet is identical. It's the same worksheet for the basics, all the way down to the bottom. And then what I've done at the bottom is I've put in things to do with chord inversions and talking about how it doesn't always have to stack up with a colour, an empty square, a colour, an empty square, a colour, and how chord inversions are now different, and how the different colours stack up and the different boxes stack up and the intervals and the difference between them are different. So Chrome Music Lab would be really good to demonstrate that with, because it has that feature that you're able to physically see the difference between the boxes and how the intervals are built on. So as much as it may seem a little bit basic and maybe a little bit babyish for higher or advanced higher, it might be good to just even get them on at once as part of a lesson to show them the interaction between the intervals between the notes and how you can take one chord and change it. So for example, if I give you an example of this one, if I take a bog standard C major chord, let's make sure that I'm back at major. Yep. If I take a C major chord, what I can say to them is I'm still looking for a first inversion chord, so I'm looking for the yellow and the green boxes to be the same, but now I'm looking for this red one to be on top. And then making sure that, for example, I'm going to keep the next two colours the same, and I'm now looking for a yellow box. And they can see the correlation between the different intervals and how many squares and things are between each box. So you could do it in that sense where we've got a task for inversions for higher and advanced higher. Chords and Songmaker. I've also got, I think, one more activity. 2 more activities, I think. So regard to composition and piano accompaniments, I've taken this from a PDF that I found online, and how we're talking about chords and chord structures and how things work together. So in this one here, I've obviously given them a little bit of introduction about piano accompaniments, how potential piano accompaniments are structured. And then what I've asked them to do down the bottom is I've asked them to change the cog settings, etc., like I did in the pentatonic task. But this is where I was talking a little bit earlier. I'm going to zoom in on this picture. Here we go. So, also I've got a capital for some reason. So what I've done in here with 3 octaves, in regard to composition, we tend to think about things in different sections. So usually we've got some sort of accompaniment, whether that's a bassline instrument and then something that would potentially play chords like a bass guitar and an acoustic guitar, or you might have something that combines both like a piano. So what I've done is I've kind of separated each octave range. It's not perfect, but it would at least give a sense of structure. So I don't know who was asking earlier about can you talk about harmonies and things? Yeah, you can, and this is the task that I've kind of started that off on. So I've allocated the bottom octave for the bass line, the middle octave for the chords, and then the top octave for the melody. And I have said your chords might end up with inversions or going into the melody line, but for them obviously not to worry about that. Again, what I've said is, can you try and replicate the printed music above? So the one at the top, which was 16 bars, and I've given them the first 4 bars. So if I scroll down, that's what the first 4 bars looks like. And if I click on this link, it should take me to that task. There it is. So at the moment, what I've done is I've obviously kept the bass line in line with what was in the task to begin with. These are just obviously C's, F's, G's, F, C, etc., which is the chord sequence above. But what I've done just to show the pupils, obviously, that a triad is built on 3 notes and that these are all on the beat at present. For this purpose here, I've obviously explained, or I would explain, that the orange boxes are technically going into the melody octave, but what they can obviously do is make sure that there is some sort of other G or orange box, and obviously they can then swap it from the top of the chord into the bottom, and it is something you could explain about ease of access when you're making a piano accompaniment, that you don't want it to be too jumpy all about the place, that you kind of want it to be a melody that flows. Obviously for this one I've done the same with the C note, but you can take these out and show them the difference in how it would sound. But the task that I've allocated them to do is to try and work out the chords and build the chords on each other, and then obviously play back the chord sequence task that I've asked them to do. So that was one that was just based on block chords, again using the task that I created for the Google Doc before. And then this is kind of the next stage of the development kind of process that we would expect for composition. And what I'd be expecting is, if I go back to the top and zoom out for you, that this whole 16 bars worth of chords and bass line should be what they then come up with, so they can see the relation. And this would obviously be, I wouldn't ask them to, that's obviously plagiarism for SQA purposes, but for them to see the correlation between here is a chord, here is what it looks like, and here is how I can change something. So that's a kind of copy and practice, but listen and see how things can be developed. The second task which I made was obviously a development on just the bog standard crotchet chord pattern. And here's the task here. So what I've said is try an accompaniment pattern that has a little more sense of motion. So now here what we're doing is we're splitting up the chords and we're adding in different notes and we're changing different things. Again, settings, you could put in learning intentions and success criteria like I did for the pentatonic task. Again, splitting the song maker into 3 sections. And then if I click on this one, I've given them a first bar and a half to show them that instead of it being a block chord, what they can do is they can change it so that they have 2 notes on top and the C can then come afterwards. So it's kind of that alternating pattern, that broken chord, that are kind of arpeggiated words and things that you could build in for the development of their composition, to show them that they don't just have to stick with the same thing on the beat. It's something to do with development. So that's the kind of way that I've used the chord maker and the song maker together. And I'm hoping potentially if we are continuing to do online learning things, that this could be an avenue that we could go down, and pupils might be able to kind of break down that a little bit more with colours and ideas. And the fact that it's instant playback as well is quite a nice idea for them to alter and change that and hear exactly what they've done there and then.
I think that's a really key point, Heather. You know, as we potentially look to moving towards blended learning, being able to use tools that they can work on in school and then continue with those same tools at home,
yeah,
I think that will help, you know, a really joined up approach in the subject.
I mean, don't get me wrong, this isn't perfect. This isn't what you'd submit potentially for SQA purposes, as much as it might be a MIDI file that you eventually end up downloading and using on some sort of software like Cubase or GarageBand, etc., and adding all the MIDI files together. You'd definitely be looking for some sort of collaboration with music notation software. So you could end up putting a link in there about gradually developing something and then showing them how to notate it on Sibelius or MuseScore, Noteflight, or Google's version of Flat.io. So there is scope to develop that. I obviously have not done it yet because obviously this is potentially new, etc., and we've got access to software in school, but it is another avenue you could easily go down.
And I think it's just about having awareness of tools, isn't it, at this stage, because we don't know what it's going to look like in terms of curriculum delivery and experience. I know it's so important.
I quite like the interface of this. I think a lot of pupils at secondary school, when you put them in front of a music notation software and they're suddenly having to write notes on the stave and write rhythms, I think suddenly they go, oh, I can't do this. I can sit and play my instrument, but I have no idea how to write things. But them being able to do this, they're actually creating something, and I don't think they might not be able to realise that. I also think it's a really nice and easy interface for them to use, just by clicking on boxes and experimenting with different things. But I'm hoping that if I've started a structured approach with them, for example, going through chords, chord structures, notes, harmonies, melodies, then it might break down that a little bit better, and then you can show them this is the rhythmic pattern. If you've used it in this box, this is how to notate it, kind of thing.
I think
And then take it from there.
You're absolutely right there. If if you're using a tool that's getting engagement and developing skills, that is so important. And then transferable skills to other packages.
Yeah, hoping so. That was my thought process behind it. I'm hoping it might be useful for some people to try out and see what happens with it. I'm happy to make instructional documents, obviously, as I go along, which is what I've done up until this point anyway. But yeah, I think it's useful.
Dropped on the screen a couple of times that resources link as well as in the chat as well. So hopefully people have been able to pick up, and thank you very much for sharing, because I know that will be appreciated by the community, and hopefully if people develop their own resources, that will be a space that people are welcome to use.
Yeah, I'll talk about a few other ones. Those are the main ones that I tend to utilise. But there are other ones. For example, I've gone through the vast majority of these ones. In regard to, I think, there's an arpeggios task that I've given, and again in regard to developing composition, I think I used the arpeggios. Yeah, so this task here uses the arpeggio pattern. It's got the cycle of fifths around the side, obviously major chords, and then obviously the relative minors in the middle. Again, cycle of fifths. So a really easy way to explain it, if you need to, if you want to go into that amount of detail for some pupils. But again, just the clear identification that potentially which ones they should be using and which ones they shouldn't be using. I think most of them are kind of on this side here. Yeah. But the experimentation with that is entirely up to the pupils. If I scroll down, it plays through different arpeggiated patterns. Those are the pattern boxes from the arpeggio, which I'll show you in a second. But I've used this for my fourth years, especially if I'm busy with a class of 20 pupils, that I'm trying to get them to create their own chord progression. What I tend to do is get them to use the Chrome arpeggio experiment and get them to be able to hear their chord sequence as they play it, and it just continually plays on a loop. So I'll give you an example of that when I'll close all these tabs. So the arpeggio one is, where is it? Oh no.
It's there, I can see it.
Where?
In the middle.
Oh, sorry, gone right past it.
So you were hovered over it when you looked for it, so the box goes yellow when you're hovered over something. So that's probably.
I was looking for the little lines. I wasn't looking for the circle. I forgot that was the icon. So what you can do with this, if you just click on C, for example, what you can do is you can get it to play the pattern at the top. So that's going to stick on C. If I change that, you can see that it then go higher, and then obviously plays the chord for you. So just for the purposes of this, I'm going to stick with C major. And if I play this in the middle button, so I'll pause it just so I can speak over it. What I would get pupils to do is play that chord over and over again, and then potentially go to another chord and see if they like the progression between the two. So if I start on C and I go to G, and I get pupils to work out their chord sequences that way, using that function there. In the arpeggios experiment, you can change the patterns that happen up the top. So if I stick on C major for this one again, this is the pattern it's going to play, which is our very famous Alberti bass line. So that pattern there, again, you can build in, and you can let them hear the differences with the different types of bass lines as well that they could potentially create, or kind of harmony lines. But there's a whole load of these ones. So that one's just the bog standard individual notes. This one's a bit fancier. And then the last one is obviously in harmony. they should be able to see, for example, the correlation between the notes and how the different colours. So the orange one then ends up on the top, the green one then ends up on the top, and you can kind of use it as a visual explanation as much as anything. But you can change the instruments. You can change it from a harp to a keyboard or piano, and you can also change the tempo and the speed of this one. It's got a nice wee diagram as well for walking and running.
I think the point you make about the visual side of things is really important, because it is visually very engaging and all very accessible, which I guess is just a case of many of the Google products being built around accessibility and helping people, learn different tools. One of the things you spoke about quite a bit early on actually was the color integration or alignment with boom whackers.
Yeah.
So my feed has kind of picked back up, so I'm seeing a few comments that I didn't see earlier. So Pauline was just saying she hadn't realised that about that. So just thought I'd highlight that, because that is really interesting. I think really useful to know as well.
This one, for some reason, I don't know why the arpeggios one. I don't know if it's because we've now got extra notes and it's now fully chromatic. But that's one thing that disappoints me, is that it's not the same as the Melody Maker. But that's just me.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we know about all kind of Google's products is they're always looking for feedback and things. So we found the product owner on Twitter. So I think that's the type of thing we can provide some feedback on and see if that can help drive some change to make the product better, especially as it's something that, we're making more use of. So, previously I'd very much kind of been focused around just using SongMaker with my classes to create simple repetitive tracks that they could put onto the simple computer games that they were creating. But actually those who are doing music as well in the senior phase, they were getting so much more out of the package than I was just introducing them to. So, I think there's some real kind of interdisciplinary and cross-curricular uses as well.
We can also use technically use your, if you did it in computer games, as evidence for meeting different levels and things, which I'm really briefly going to talk about.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it's something that I think it is a cross-curricular thing. If there are people who are using this, for example, I'm going to talk about science just for 2 wee minutes to do with music technology. The first unit we do for third year tech is all to do with sound waves. So there is a kind of cross-curricular link in that sense with science. And there might be some scientists and people that you could say, oh, look, there is this thing if you wanted to use it, and see what they come up with.
Great. Well, let's have a look at that, because that is fantastic with the sound waves.
But the arpeggios one, just to finish off, I use that so much for fourth year chord sequences and third year chord sequences, because they're able to hear the difference and they can I don't like going from C to E minor, for example, or whatever. You can give them set colours and things to use if you wanted. Obviously just take the picture and then just say, right, you're only going to use X, Y, Z, and work it that way. But that chord, I think is it this one? No, it's this one. Here, for example, I've suggested creating your own chord sequences, C major, and I've given them the chords in which to use. Again, I've used it in A minor. This is all just evidence banking for SQA and leveling for me. Again, changing to F major, the chords, D minor, the chords, etc., and then down the bottom, obviously, which chord sequence did you like best? And then you could potentially go back to the SongMaker chords task and activity, and get them to work out the chords and what notes are used by integrating two of the features of the Chrome Music Lab into one. So something else for you to use. Last couple of ones. So if I scroll down, this is one I've just started using with the third years. This is your task for Tuesday. So spectrogram has limited features, but it's quite useful. It shows a visual picture of the frequencies that make up sound. We don't tend to talk too much about this in music tech. We just kind of tend to look at what is a good sound wave look like. How do you get a good sound wave from recording? At the moment, they've got an option to choose from different instruments or sound sources from the screens at the bottom. Again, they can obviously record their own sound using the microphone, and you can draw, which gave my boyfriend quite a fright yesterday when I started drawing on this, and it came out a bit squeaky, and he's like, what on earth is that? So that was quite interesting. So the two tasks I've made or the one task I made for the spectrogram worksheet is this one here. So again, it's a visual picture of the frequencies. If I click on this, you should be able to see it. And down the bottom, you've got a whole load of different instruments. You've got birds. And you can see obviously on the screen the different frequencies of the pitches and stuff, and obviously they're in very bright kind of colours. Obviously you can see that they're built up of different notes. So there's a flute one down the bottom. Lovely example of a major scale. You can see it building, but you can also see that it's not just the notes in the middle. There are other ones that are made up. And you can obviously click on the little, this is the one that gave him a fright yesterday, the little hand arrow one. You can click on and then you can wiggle about the screen. Etc, etc. And you can muck about with those ones and see that the red one in the middle's the most prominent noise. Sorry, did I give you fright with that one?
I think one of the interfaces, obviously, if you're on a touch device, then kind of a different level of interactivity there, isn't there?
Yeah. So the task that I've done with this one for the third years, I've basically just asked them to choose an instrument, and again I've asked the differences. So what is their sound sources have they chosen? And then to identify the differences, so they're able to give me a definition and a description of what they see on the screen, and then obviously what they hear. What do loud sounds and quiet sounds look like? But I've also got them to do this task down here, which is basically to click on the microphone and to say or sing ah, and then to say or sing ee, and then just to see how things change, because it's really important with music tech that they understand that different sounds, etc., can have different effects on what their sound wave looks like, and in order to how to kind of fix problems and things. So the K one, for example, and this will end up with potential microphone problems. So I'm starting to bring in other aspects of the course here by getting them to think about what different letters and things would say. And then just down the bottom here, just for fun, click on the microphone, speak normally, and watch what happens. So again, they would be different pitches. And then draw a picture with the spectrogram using the pointer finger. And then I've obviously given them, you can insert screenshots here if you want me to kind of see what they're up for. And then obviously giving them hints about how to take a screenshot. So that's the spectrogram. It doesn't particularly have many features, but it is quite fun. But
I think the Cameron has picked up that the spectrogram great for ASN learners just because of its sensory nature. I think that be a really exciting way of using it.
Absolutely. And I would agree that, for example, like the bird one, it's a very natural sound rather than it being just a bird tweeting, consistently. Some of the other ones as well, there's like people in this one, just like whistling. What you could even do with, for example, ASM pupils is get them to mimic that, or mimic the sounds back, or see if they can create it in some way using different instruments or something like that. It's got potential.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It does get a bit boring after a while if, once you get to a stage and you're like, right, I've done them all, what do I do now? But
absolutely, yeah. But I guess that's the having a really kind of clear idea of what you want to use it for. What's the learning outcome from that, and then do that, move on. So nice and short, sharp engagement, I think, is great.
Yeah, so that was just a really quick worksheet for the third years, and I've also used it in collaboration with the oscillators tab. Now, when me and Ian were planning for this, he loved this, and I love this to bits. So there's little characters which I think relate to the Mr. Men.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that too.
So basically there's 4 different types of oscillators. I tend to always go for the guy at the end because it gives a good sound wave. Obviously I've asked them, what was your favourite character and why? I just want to know, out of sheer curiosity. And then obviously to do with different frequency values, whether they produce a high note or a high sound or a low sound. Obviously, what do they notice about the waveform of each of the oscillations? What does it look like when you play a high note? What does it look like when they play a low note? And then the kind of extension task that I get secondary pupils to do is to try and get them to think about oscillation and frequency value. So, for example, a standard A, note A in the key on the piano above middle C is at 440 hertz, whereas the one above, an octave above, is 880. So the correlation between the two is that it doubles in value, therefore it doubles in pitch. Therefore, you should be hearing an octave and trying to get them to understand the relationship between each note and how frequencies relate to pitch value. In that sense, inside of things, there is a keyboard that I tend to show them, but I'm not showing them in this task, just to see if they can work out that identification between the two. And then obviously, if I was in a classroom situation, I would actually say, right, here's 440 hertz, for example, go and find out what note that is on the keyboard, and get them to kind of do an interactive task around that. I could put that in the bottom, but for the purposes of that, I haven't. But that's the kind of other main ones that I tend to use around the Chrome Music Lab. There are a few other ones I've put in here that you can have to look at.
We're going to take a quick look at the oscillators.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've seen them.
I want to turn your speakers down.
Just ask a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Just about the spectrogram. So does the microphone input allow you to choose a different audio input? So the answer to that is no, it doesn't. But I'm wondering if you were looking into the Chrome settings on the browser, if you could select a different line in than the microphone.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
That isn't something I've actually tried, but I certainly know, in the Chrome browser, it asks you to, approve the use of the microphone. And then if you click on the little kind of camera icon that appears in the right-hand corner next to where your bookmark icon is at the end of the Omnibox, it does let you select which source your microphone is coming from. So
you might be able to change that through the settings.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if your browser is feeding it. So Cameron was thinking potentially an electric drum kit, for example. So I guess we think it could potentially be possible, but don't know.
I don't have an electric drum kit to try out with, I'm afraid.
That's right. Well, Cameron, if you do give that a go, let us know and tweet Heather and I, because we'd be interested to find out.
I was going to click on the little computer one down the bottom, but then I remembered that that's the DSL, the dial-up tone, and I was like, well, that was apt for this morning.
Oh, well, that's. I think we've done quite well, actually, because the first half of our live stream was done off a 4G connection with my phone hanging out the window. So I'm pleased we've made it this far. Anyway, we were going to look at the oscillators before I jumped in with the question.
I would maybe turn down your speakers or for this one. So
yeah.
I'll start off very low, but it does go quite high. And obviously I've got headphones on at the moment, so this is probably going to go in one ear or the other. So again, you can change the little Mr. Men, as I like to call them, or little characters. So you've got the square, you've got the guy who's apparently called Sawtooth, triangle, and then the circle. Each of them do the same purpose. Again, the oscillator frequency value, it's automatically kind of set at 440, but you can squash them, you can make them bigger. So for example, that's a frequency value of 1, and I can't hear anything. But you can see the sound wave is moving, and I get them to kind of look at the differences between the sound waves and the gap, etc. They've already done a frequency and amplitude. But if I start making them bigger, etc., you can see how the sound wave obviously gets bigger, etc. As we go.
I think we got some lag, so I didn't hear anything there, actually. So there we are.
Do you not hear it now?
No.
Can you hear the high pitched one? Should I give it a go?
Oh well, yeah, just quickly. Right, very good. People can play with that themselves, can't they?
Absolutely, it does kind of go.
Great fun though.
Yeah, so that's the oscillators one. The last, there's not many ones that I tend to utilise. The rhythm one, I managed to, in the resources folder, I managed to download a PDF that's got lessons already based on this one. So that's by a lady called Our Lady at Midnight Music. There's lesson plans for the rhythm ones. I don't tend to use it, if I'm totally honest. I think it's very, very, very basic.
It's simple, isn't it? The rhythm, I think, a couple of drums and a triangle, I think, is all that's.
It looks nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
If anything, it changes the meter between 3, 4, 5, and 6, but that's about it.
Potentially for primary children. Really nice tool there.
Absolutely. And then in that bit at the bottom, if you scroll all the way down, it's got worksheets that you can print off that you change your instruments, what your rhythm, etc., and you can muck about with that. But there is lesson plan there for you. I've not just written off. The last one I think that I've used or I've written about in here is Kandinsky. And I actually had a kind of brainwave a little bit about this. So this is more primary based. I've been asked to go into the hubs next week. And I was thinking, what can I do with the pupils? And I did wonder whether or not to do something based around this. So Kandinsky was an artist who believed that there was a relationship between music and sound. If I show my presentation, which you can have a look at. So some of his artwork and things was all to do with big pictures and shapes and things, and you can change stuff on this. So this experiment, you can draw shapes, lines, scribbles, and then obviously they turn them into sounds. Down the side, I've just told you the features. So different shapes make different sounds. For example, if I draw you a circle and a triangle. So two entirely different sounds for that one. Also, for example, if I was to draw a square, we'll make a different sound as well. But I mean, it's got very limited features. There's not very much you can do. There's a line, but it changes instruments and things. But it's very much kind of, well, I wouldn't use it in a secondary sense, but you could easily use it in a primary setting for that. So that's the kind of Kandinsky side of things. And you can change the colours as well if you want to. You can change it to kind of 2 and 2s and 3s, so pink and purple and it's blue. And each one of them has kind of got a different sound.
And that's changed the sounds as well, yeah.
Yeah. So there is experiments you can do with that one. For example, I've got a list here of actually ones that I'm potentially going to try out for the Kandinsky side of things. Give me 2 seconds to find out for you. So, for example, you could get students to draw a picture using 3 lines or shapes, and then obviously they can copy their picture onto the Kandinsky side of things and get them to play it back to you. And does their expectation of what they've drawn relate to what they hear in the Kandinsky side of things? And if they would change anything, they could draw a picture on the screen, play it back, and identify what different sounds and stuff they hear. What colours do you think is best? If you draw horizontal lines on the screen at different heights, what's the difference between those? If you draw triangles, what sound does it make? Different shapes, etc. But there is obviously cross-curricular opportunities to learn about the artist to create some kind of art projects based around that. And I think I might do something like that at the hubs, because if you Google Kandinsky's art, there's like trees out of circles and things in different colours. So I don't know, I'm looking for something interactive that I can do, and I did wonder whether or not this is something I could utilise.
Fabulous.
Showing pictures that match.
Sorry, my phone's just...
Yeah,
Google.
She likes to listen in. That's excellent.
So there you go. That's kind of my whistle-stop tour of Chrome Music Lab and some resources potentially that you could take away and utilise. Obviously, if I can get some feedback as well, that would be great. You can tweet me.
Yeah, so people can tweet Heather the feedback, but also for today's live stream, we're getting feedback, just a bit.ly address, stream 2905. So, absolutely welcome everyone who's still watching to feed in the feedback form. Kind of really sorry that the live stream maybe didn't start quite as smoothly as we'd like. I see, Heather, you've put your Twitter handle, so I'll put that on screen for you. But hopefully it's been really useful and it's kind of sparked some ideas, and we'll watch it back. And if we think we've kind of not quite got the messages across how we'd like, we'll maybe put in another live stream in the diary, because I think the tool is really, really good. And I think you're doing some really exciting things with it. So it's brilliant to be able to share that with everyone. So thank you very much. So yeah, thank you, Heather. Any kind of final questions from anyone in the chat, or any kind of final thoughts from you, Heather?
No, I think it's just finding creative ways to do things. I mean, I think we're all adapting to this digital learning side of things, and it's just trying to find which things are adaptable, which things you can use, which things are available, and then just giving them a go and seeing what happens.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right there. It's finding methods that work both, in school and at home for the kind of new world blended approach that I think we'll all be adopting after the summer holidays. So thanks very much for sharing again. I'm sure it's been appreciated. And if people are watching on catch up, welcome to fill in the feedback form then as well, because we'll be able to pick up the feedback at a later date as well. So thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you very much, Heather. And that's goodbye from us. Bye, everyone.
Bye.